It's Radio Free 501c, the podcast of Rogue Tulips Consulting. I'm Cecilia Sepp, your host. Welcome to Season 7. This week, I'm joined by a returning guest. It's Bruce Rosenthal, and he's here to talk with us about mastering association corporate sponsorships. He wrote the book on this topic. It's Monday, June 23rd, 2025. Welcome to episode 290. Hey everybody, it's Monday, June 23rd. That means it's time for another episode of Radio Free 501c, brought to you by Rogue Tulips Consultant. Thanks for joining us this week. I'm your host, Cecilia Sepp. I'm the principal and founder of Rogue Tulips, and I want to say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to our global audience, wherever you may be. And a gentle reminder, if you haven't followed us yet on your favorite podcast service or subscribed, please take a moment and do that. We are having a fantastic year of conversations. And in an unusual twist this week, we're having a returning guest. We have had a year of first-time guests on this podcast, but Bruce Rosenthal is back this week. He's here to talk with us about mastering corporate sponsorships, and he's actually written the book on it. Bruce, welcome back. Would you like to say hello to the audience and tell us a little about yourself?
Hi, Cecilia. Hi, everybody. Great to be here. I've been both on the association exec side with an association, on the consulting side, working a lot in sponsorships, and decided last year to pull it all together into a book, to take what I had learned from working with clients, from working with corporate sponsors, and kind of do the soup to nuts guide on what associations need to know to master association corporate sponsorships.
Well, this is great. And as you and I were preparing for this episode, I reminded you that when we very first met many years ago, this was the topic of conversation because you had just started consulting at that point, and this was what you wanted to work on. And you and I had a lot of common viewpoints on the subject. So, for the audience, if you could explain a little bit the difference between an advertiser and a sponsor and a corporate partner.
Sure, it is all corporate money. And you're right, Cecilia, when you and I first talked about this about 8 years ago when I started consulting, it was interesting when I started consulting and telling folks what I did, they were like, well, could you edit our sponsorship prospectus and kind of redline it and make some changes in the benefits? And I said, no, I do consulting on helping organizations really bring in companies and work with them. And I would get these kind of confused looks because that really wasn't a thing back then. And there weren't too many folks with associations or consultants talking about it. But the general model for many years, and I have a slide in one of my PowerPoints that has kind of the merchant's booth back in medieval times, and that was really the origin of a lot of the way associations worked with companies. It was like give them a booth, give them a sign, give them a logo placement, and members will come to those booths or those merchant stands in the exhibit hall, and members will be eternally grateful for the support. And then it kind of ramped up a little from those exhibit booths. Well, if we give the company a bigger sign or some ad placement in the program on the app, then we can get more money, and then we'll call that a gold, silver, bronze sponsorship. I've seen this actually as many as 7 different levels: platinum, gold, silver, bronze, styrofoam, aluminum, whatever. Um, and but it was very commoditized. And what really happened with those very transactional sponsorships was the companies began to realize that they really didn't necessarily need another logo placement. And we
Mhm.
kind of now fast forward through the pandemic lockdown and since, and kind of the wide open spaces now, the companies can really reach and teach through social media and through their own webinars that another logo placement doesn't really work. So while there are definitely opportunities to have some, a few transactional gold, silver, bronze sponsorships at a conference, the real opportunity is to bring companies in and truly partner with them. And one of the other slides I have in one of my PowerPoints is that the word partner is a noun and a verb.
Mhm.
And we often treat it as a noun. And we say, oh, the company's a partner. They're good to go. We really like them as a partner. But what the companies are looking for is the verb version of partner. They truly want to partner. They want to be inside the tent, not to sell, but to collaborate with the association and to work with the members. And I used to work with an association CEO who made a very good point that the association's members And the sponsors, customers, and clients are the same people. We're all trying to help the same group of organizations or individuals or businesses solve their problems. And as we know now, the problems are far more complex than ever, whether it's global issues, social issues, economic issues, tariff issues, a whole range of issues. And associations, whether they have 3 staff, 30, or 300 staff, generally don't have all the answers to all members' challenges all the time. In many cases, the companies have some of the answers. They're doing research and development. They're analyzing regulations that have come into play, and are often glad to partner with the association to reach and teach members. So the partnering has a much higher value, not only in terms of revenue, but mostly for the members. And members always come first in a good sponsorship and partnership program.
Well, and I really like that you point that out. Partner's a verb. It's something that you have to keep working on. And we talk a lot about relationships in the association management profession and in our communities. And that's what that is. A corporate partner is a relationship. And that means you have to work at it, talk to each other, find out how you can help each other. And I agree 100% on increasing member value because members are getting access to content or services that they may not have known about, or the association may not have been able to provide because associations have limited resources. Trade associations, yes, huge budgets, huge amounts of money, but they're also very focused usually on advocacy issues. But
Mhm.
when you're looking at professional societies and the needs of the individual member, that really can be better served by having these sort of partnerships with corporate partners. And I think too often we look at people that we want to support us with corporate money as people that are welcome but not welcome. And I think that's a mindset shift that we need to work on. I think you address that in your book somewhat. So how could we change that mindset? How can we shift it so that we do see corporate partners as an actual partner and not just somebody who's like, okay, they're going to give us money and we're going to put their logo on the podium?
Right. And yeah, when I used to work with an association, we had a corporate partner, year-long corporate partner, and they were always kind of my bellwether for how we were doing with the program. And if we deviated from that, really bringing the corporate partners inside the tent, this one corporate partner, the CEO would call me and say, Bruce, do you want our money or do you want our brains? If you just want our money, this is probably not the right place for us, or we'll just get a bigger booth or we'll buy some ads. But if you really want us to work with your members, um, there are opportunities to do that. A number of years ago, I was working with a client, and we were at a call with one of their prospective corporate partners, and the association was saying, well, one way we could work together to help our members is your company could provide some faculty for some of our webinars. So good start. So not just a logo placement, but really bringing the company in and having them on the faculty for webinars. And the association kind of get very proud of itself and said, we get probably 200 people at our webinars. And the company said, well, we could do that. But they said, our company also does webinars. We get upwards of 1,000 people at our company webinars, and they're educational webinars. They're not user groups and they're not sales pitches. We get up to 1,000. And I thought, wow, is this conversation going the wrong direction real fast? But then the company said, what we lack on our webinars, they are educational webinars, but it is all folks from our company as presenters. It would really be useful if there is a subject matter expert with the association, a committee chair, a staff person who could be on our corporate webinar and reach these thousands of people. And that became the win-win. That became the partnership. So there were definitely times when the partner company would provide faculty for the association's webinars, but there were also times that the association would provide faculty for the company's webinars. And the other advantage there to the association is some of those 1,000 people at the company's webinars might not be members yet. So it's reaching a much larger audience. And plus, I always think associations should be where their members are. So to have a company out there promoting its webinar and not have somebody from the association in the room or on the screen is a missed opportunity. And in fact, I heard from an association recently, they were very frustrated. There was a company that had been a sponsor, dropped their sponsorship, dropped their booth and started a webinar series. And the company was calling members of the association to be faculty, paying them to be faculty on the company's webinars. So nothing wrong with that. Members aren't doing anything wrong. But why isn't the association there as the broker doing the webinar, inviting the members, inviting the corporate sponsors, and at the end of the day, monetizing that and bringing in a company as a partner? But the company had made, in their view, and I don't fault them for this, the right business decision. They weren't getting value as a sponsor, or they were getting their gold, silver, bronze, and cushier carpeting in their booth and a bigger logo in the convention center. But that wasn't working for them. They realized they needed to educate members, not just get logo visibility. So they went down a path, and that was not the association's path.
Well, and when you're talking about connection and relationships, that's really what we need. That's what all humans need at some level, no matter what we're doing. So when a corporate partner wants to work with your association, they want that connection. So if you're not giving it to them, if all you're offering them is an exhibit booth, which I frankly think they're way overpriced too, that's my opinion. So I've never bought one, but I think we charge a lot of money for an exhibit hall space where maybe they're really not reaching the right people. And a lot of times people don't go to the exhibit hall. So that's not really connection. That's just standing there hoping somebody will talk to you, as opposed to some of the ideas you've just shared, like let's work with them to create a webinar series. Let's get our members to be faculty, or let's let them come and teach something, or let's let them host a reception at our annual conference and actually come to the reception and talk to everybody. So that interaction and the whole, I know I laugh about the gold, silver, bronze too. It's like, it's so rigid. So what are some other approaches that associations can take that aren't so rigid? Like what are some of the things you suggest to clients that you work with?
Well, it always starts with members first. So I start with not what do companies want, what will they pay for, but what do the members need? So looking at the latest member surveys, looking at any issues that the members are posting about in an online community that the association has, or a listserv, listening to topics that come up when association staff go out and talk to chapters or affiliates, and what are the key topics that keep coming up? And also to look at all of the association's communications channels. And we often start with, oh, well, we have a conference and we have a webinar or we have a podcast. Think of all the different communications channels that an association has and almost look at it. And one of the chapters in my book is on the marketing agency model, to really view your association as a marketing agency. What are all the different communications channels, the outreach that you have, the in-person, the virtual outreach? Can you segment members? And sometimes a large association is of less interest to a company because they don't necessarily need to reach 5 or 10,000 people. Maybe they need to reach 300 of them based on a certain title or demographic. So to have that list of topics of things members need information about, to have the list of all the communications channels and forums, and then to contact companies, now with a broad prospectus, actually with no prospectus. Marketing agencies don't have prospectuses. They have a website that says we're really good in healthcare, media relations, and we do websites and we do these things. Call us for more information. So kind of going back to an experience I had when I worked with an association, I'll kind of tie this together. The association was launching a new initiative, and someone on staff said, well, I have a friend with a marketing agency. Her agency will spend some time with us to help us with the launch of this new initiative. So we went to the agency's office and we went into a large conference room, and they had two people sitting there with laptops with the agency typing notes of the conversation, a wall-sized whiteboard, and they asked us questions for 90 minutes. What is this, a new association initiative? Why are you launching it? Is there competition for this? Who do you think the audience is? On and on and on and on. And at the end of 90 minutes, so the people on the laptops are taking all these notes and things are flying up on the whiteboard. And at the end of the 90 minutes, I said, well, you've got all this information. What can you do for us? And they said, we'll schedule a call with you for next week. We're going to take all this information and we're going to come back to you with a plan. So that's the model that I talk about in the book that I use with prospective corporate partners or renewals of current corporate partners to sit down with the companies and have a conversation. And I start those conversations by saying, we are selling nothing today. You will not hear us talk about gold, silver, bronze. You will not hear us talk about deadlines for anything. We want to talk about your company. We want to know about your company's business objectives, your marketing goals. Do you want to reach a segment? What do you think our members think about you now? How would you like them to think about you? No tactics. If they start talking about, oh, and when's the convention? What size is the booth that we would get? Like, let's talk about goals and objectives, not tactics. And when I start by saying we are selling nothing today, all of a sudden the whole vibe changes. The cell phones go down, the pens go down, and I get the focused attention. And invariably, I get 10 minutes into the conversation, and I've had companies that'll say, we sponsor 30 associations a year. Nobody has ever asked us these questions about our company. So it's kind of, and you implied earlier, it's very much kind of showing interest and empathy, which is just kind of a personal trait as well as a business trait. Um, but to just ask questions, ask follow-up questions, ideally do those meetings with two people from the association staff so someone can take a lot of notes, like those people on the laptops and the whiteboard, take a lot of notes. And at the end of the conversation, which usually needs 45 minutes, could be done in 30, but that usually cuts it kind of short because it's a good conversation. And at the end of the conversation, as I learned with the marketing agency years ago, say, this has been a great conversation. I have pages and pages of notes. Can we schedule a call for next week? And then to take those pages and pages of notes and ideas back to the office, in person or virtual, and start talking to others on staff the same way as the marketing agency would do. So the marketing agency would say, wow, it looks like these folks really, to launch their new initiative, they need a new page on their website, and they need some speech training for their CEO to give some speeches on this. And all the different things they could offer based on their capabilities. It's not prepackaged gold, silver, bronze. It's not giving the client a list. Oh, here are the 40 things that we do, pick and choose. It's a curated, customized list for that client. So we want to go back to companies a week later and say, we understand these are your 5 big goals. Did we get those right? Here's what we have outlined to achieve those goals. And it's going to be different for every company. And companies will, and even if it's a company that has bought 4 or 5 different sponsorships during the year, conference sponsorships, webinar sponsorships, ads, booths, all of that, pulling all that together into one does 2 things. It's one spend for the company. They don't need to keep going back to their boss and say, oh, I need another purchase order for the association, or oh, here's another decision, or oh, does this fit into the budget? It's one purchase. And more importantly, it's around one theme. So is that company really an expert in topic X? Could that company be our signature partner for X for the coming year? And that's when companies say, oh, this is like a marketing agency. And I had an experience a number of years ago. I was negotiating with an association and one of their corporate partners, and the company really kept pushing back on the fee. And the fee was $50,000. Keep in mind, everything can be scaled up and scaled down in what we're talking about today. And in the book, depending on the size of your association, 50,000 might seem like a lot or a little. But it was a big Fortune 100 company, and they kept pushing back on the 50,000. And I said, can I just ask you guys a question? Have you ever spent $50,000 with a marketing agency? And they said, oh yeah, all the time.
Wow.
But they were not viewing the association as a marketing agency. They were not viewing the association as having multiple communications channels to targeted audiences. So when we can really approach companies with what their goals and objectives are, align those with what members need, and come up with a series that then we talk about tactics. Here's how we will tactically implement this in a way that meets your association's goals and objectives.
I love that idea, though. I've never thought of it that way, really. Marketing agency, but in a lot of ways, an association can fill that function for a corporate partner. But also, what I hear a lot of when you're talking about, well, here's a new way to approach it or a different way to approach it, is it's options. It's not so rigid. It's not gold, silver, bronze. Let's talk about options. What are you interested in? What can we do together? What do we have that can support you? And I think that's really thing that we're all looking for in life, right? We're all looking for options. When we're a member, we want to have our own unique member experience. If we're a corporate
Hmm.
partner, we want to have those options. And it reminds me of how the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons celebrated their 75th anniversary years ago. Sandy Gordon was there at the time, and she had 4 years, which most of us don't get that. We don't get 4 years to plan something, but she had 4 years to come up with a plan and create a 75th anniversary celebration. She developed an entire list of options. So there was an online timeline, the history of the organization and the specialty. They made a documentary, they had a book, they could just donate money in support of all these other projects, or they could just pick the project they wanted. And she spent a couple of years going around talking with people, explaining, well, here's what we're doing, here's our options. Is this something you might be interested in supporting and being involved with? They ended up getting so much support. They were even able to create an art show of artwork done by veterans who had had orthopedic surgery, and it went all around the country promoting. So it was really a very bold approach to not just celebrating an anniversary, but to giving those options to those partners who want to work with your association. And I always thought it was a brilliant way to do it. And of course, we don't all have the luxury of a 4 year timeline to create something, but I think there's a lot of lessons in that example.
Yep. No, I think it's a great example. Whether it's 4 years or 4 months, it's what I heard from that story, Cecilia, is that CEO brought those companies in during the planning stage. It
Mhm.
wasn't like we created the whole thing. Would you like to buy an ad in the program or get your logo placed? Companies like to be part of the planning process, not to dictate the planning process. They're providing input like anybody else would. But I got a call a number of years ago from an association exec, and she said, Bruce, I'm not a client, but I've seen your name out there. I have a question. I got a problem. I said, what's the problem? And she said, well, our association had an awards program at our big conference, and it was underwritten by a large company, well-known company. And she said, after the awards program 1 year, staff got together and said, this awards program would really get more visibility at our association's other conference. So we put everything into place to move the program to the other conference. And then we called the company and said, great news, we've just moved your awards program to the other conference. Didn't turn out well. The company was like, you did what? We did, you didn't call us? And she said, now the company's rep is coming in to meet with our association CEO. What should we do? And I said, well, first of all, beg forgiveness, but treat them like they are truly partners. And if you have an idea, whether it's for an anniversary event or to change a benefit like an awards program that a company has supported for years, just call them and bring them into the conversation. Or we're setting up a task force. We'd like you to be on the task force to think about our anniversary. Or there's this new, I mean, what some associations have been doing the last few months because of all the changes in federal policies and all that and grants is they've set up task forces. Well, invite some of the companies to be on the task force. They may have some ideas on how associations can navigate this changing federal policy environment or the grant environment, but at least bring them in, because what I generally find is because of this fact that the association's members are the company's customers, the association and the companies are usually wrestling with the same issues. How can we help our stakeholders? And why not do that together as partners? And then at the end of the day, the association is monetizing that. And that is not a bad thing. And I have
It
a
is.
client in the nursing space, and the CEO is a former nurse, worked her way up through nurse administration, and a couple of years ago was tapped as the CEO of the association. And I was talking with her about their how to improve their corporate partner program, and she's talking about, well, we can offer these sorts of things, and then she said, and we got to monetize this. And then she said, but I'm just a nurse, what do I know? So even as a trained professional in that space, and she said that kind of facetiously, but I said, you're absolutely right. I mean, you're running a business here, and that's really the underpinning of a lot of the strategies that I talk about in mastering association corporate sponsorships. We need to treat this like a business. And we can start with the mission, and that's why I'll start with talking about what do members need. We're not selling out. And if any of those conversations with companies don't go well, or the company gets very demanding, then you don't do the deal.
Right.
And I think that's also hard for associations sometimes. And I had that experience when I worked at the association. We had a company that was paying $70,000 for a year-long corporate partnership. We talked about a renewal, and they said, "Yeah, Bruce, we really don't have that much money next year. We have $35,000, and we'd like to co-sponsor a major research initiative with the association."
Mm.
And so I went down the hall and talked to my colleague, and I said, we've got other companies at 70,000. This company's been at 70. They want to pay 35,000 and do this major co-sponsored research initiative. What should we do? And he said, "We're not going to do it. It does not, we're running a business here. We can't support that for 35,000. It isn't fair to the other companies that are paying more. And, we will talk with them about it. We'll see, well, maybe we take a year off of the partnership. Maybe they get a bigger exhibit booth or some ads, but we're running a business here." And I do a lot of restaurant analogies. And if somebody came into the high price restaurant and said, "Wow, the steak dinner looks fantastic, but I really can't afford this $55. Can I just pay you $30? Would that be okay?"
Right. Okay. Yeah, that is a good analogy. It's like, no, because you do need to keep the fairness factor. I agree 100% on that.
Right. And it doesn't mean they all need to pay exactly the same or be the same deal, because they are going to be customized.
Mhm.
But I think even aside from the fairness part, it was like we really couldn't support a major research initiative for $35,000.
Yeah. That's really not a lot for a major initiative. I agree. So, but before we wrap up, because I always enjoy talking with you and we always could wax on about sponsors for much longer, but I do want to talk a little bit more specifically about the actual book that has captured all this wisdom. So, could you explain to us how you set the book up? And it's in how and why. So, could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So we started with the first part of the book. Part one is the why, really the business plan. And using another one of my restaurant analogies, this would be like if we wanted to open a new restaurant, and it's like, why do we want to open the restaurant? There needs to be a good reason to open it. Have we done a competitive analysis of other restaurants in the neighborhood? Have we thought about type of cuisine? Is this going to be upscale or affordable? Um, how many meals a day are we going to offer? Is this breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or is this more of a lunch and dinner restaurant? Are we going to offer catering? Are we going to offer carryout? Are we going to set it up with a space for parties? So thinking about that business plan, and that's really the business plan for a sponsorship program. What sort of program do we want? What types of things might we offer to companies? Um, and that's also the why discussion is a great discussion to have with the board, because the board is almost like the restaurant analogy, like those who are going to finance the restaurant. They need to know this is a good idea, that there's been a competitive analysis, that we know what it's going to be like. And the second part of the book, part two, is the how, more the operations plan. So back to the restaurant analogy, this would be like, so what is the interior design going to look like? What is the menu design going to look like? What types of entrees and desserts are going to be on the menu? What are the staff needs? What kind of chef are we going to hire? What are our needs as far as wait staff? If we decided we're going to do catering, what sort of other staff do we need to work with clients on catering menus and delivering food for catered events and all that? We need a marketing plan in place. We need to gather customer feedback. Is this a good idea? Do customers like coming here? That's really the operations plan. And that would be similar to the association saying, okay, the board signed off on the business plan. We're going to revamp the sponsorship program. Now we really need to think about who's on the prospect list. Let's go start having those exploratory conversations with companies. Let's decide who on staff is really going to help with the social media campaign for the sponsor and the education component and the other things that we decide are part of this partnership. And then how are we going to market it? How are we going to gather feedback? How are we going to determine if customers like this, how it's going? And that second part the how, the operations plan is also probably something the board needs to be less involved in, because if we were talking about this as a major, for example, research initiative, or international initiative in association, sure, the board would be involved in what is the reasons we're doing this, why are we doing it, but the real day-to-day staffing, how are we going to implement it, how are we going to measure success is less of a board role. So for associations that want to look at the book and say, yeah, let's buy some copies of the book, so at least the board can look at the why chapter, the why part of the book, and see why we're going to do this. And then the association staff can also focus not just on the why, but on the how. How are we going to really make this operation work?
Well, and I think that's a great approach because I don't think we ask that question why enough when we're getting ready to do a project or launch a new program or create a corporate partnership program. So I think that's really a great way to approach it. We don't want to give away too much though, because we think people should buy this book. Where can they get it?
Sure, there's a wealth of information on my website. In fact, going to my website, brucerosenthal.associates, there's a link at the top of each page for more information about the book. Or you can go directly to Amazon.com, and if you do a search for sponsorship, Bruce, the book should come up among the top searches. And I'm also on social media. Um, and there's information in my LinkedIn about section about the book. And the website also has a range of other blogs and articles and upcoming events and things you can learn about corporate sponsorships.
That's great. And since you've already told us how to get in touch with you, I would like to ask you, what is the one thought you would like the audience to take away today as they think about when they're going to buy your book?
Recognizing that it's important for associations to recognize the way we have done things in the past may not be the best way. Times have changed. And the sponsorship world has become extraordinarily competitive. And when I started consulting 8 years ago and worked with associations and competitive analyses, we would come up with 15, 20, 25 competitors, other associations, a couple trade journals and things in that space. And now when I do competitive analyses, it's 40, 50, 60 competitors. Other places that companies can go to achieve those goals and objectives if they didn't go to your association. And in some cases, that can be, there was a company that told me last year, they can get more traction out of $10,000 of Google ads than a $50,000 partnership with the association. So it is very competitive. So this idea that associations have advanced for many years, that, be a sponsor of our event and we'll give your company a lot of recognition and a lot of logo placements, and it'll reduce registration fees and our members will be eternally grateful, really doesn't cut it anymore, because associations are measuring and they're looking at ROI and cost of customer acquisition and clicks on websites. So we really can benefit from truly partnering with companies around the needs of members to achieve members' needs and to increase revenue for the association by sitting down with companies, a select group of companies. So this is not a mass email of a prospectus to 400 companies, but really working with companies, because the companies are already out there talking to members, working with members, have access to members. Well, let's bring them inside the tent and come up with that business model. And that business model can definitely be set up in alignment with the mission of the association and the needs of its members. But there are huge opportunities. We don't want to leave money on the table. And the companies, the one other thought is the companies, well, a number of associations have said, well, that company dropped their sponsorship, they must be cutting their marketing budget. And I then talk to the companies, and the companies say, no, we're not cutting our sponsorship budget. Our sponsorship budget is the same as it was last year. What we're doing this year is reducing the number of associations we sponsor by 20%. Looking for the associations where there is value, because companies truly want to partner with associations. But if it's going to be the very transactional logo placements, banner ads, wave from the podium at the general session for 3 days, companies are saying, yes, it was a good 3-day conference. We enjoyed that experience for 3 days. What about the other 360 plus days a year?
Right.
We need to be out there with our message, and we see value in working with associations, but we are going to put our resources into associations that can partner with us and achieve those goals together.
Well, and I think in today's world, as you mentioned, it's a lot more complicated and things are more complex when it comes to arranging programs, solving problems, and building relationships. And I think through the lens of experience, we need to understand that that probably never was the best way to go. But it's, you shared an example from Henry Ford about if he asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. You said that in our prep conversation,
Mm.
because people don't know that there are those other options. So, for many years, we just gave those options and people didn't think they could ask for something different.
Yep, and there is huge alignment. Just one other quick story. I was had an association client a few years ago in the medical space, specialty doctors, and I was invited to their corporate council meeting, which included senior executives from their corporate partner companies, as well as their board members. And the question for the hour was, what is the major challenge facing our profession? So they went around the table with board members and corporate partners answering the question. And if I had been blindfolded, I would not have known who was answering the question, a corporate partner or a board member, because they said the exact same things. So again, in the medical space, doctors, regulatory issues, providing quality care for patients, insurance issues, working with insurance companies, working with large hospital systems, they identified the exact same issues. So then they started talking about truly partnering. Well, what if we work together on a letter to insurance companies? What if we went together to a federal agency and made our case? So the issues are the same. And by partnering, the association um, can benefit from that knowledge and wisdom, and also ensure those companies don't go off and start reaching members on their own, that they will work with the association as partners.
Well, Bruce, I want to thank you for sharing all these wonderful examples. I hope it gets people thinking more about how we can partner with all of the different people in our community, whether they're consultants or corporate partners or associations. We can all work together.
Thank you, Cecilia.
Well, the book is Mastering Association Corporate Sponsorships by Bruce Rosenthal, who's also an expert in that area. So pick up his book at Amazon.com. And while you're there, you might want to check out my book too, Association Chapter Systems from Frustrating to Fruitful. And you can get another perspective on how to build strong relationships as well. So we have to go rogue for now. But I do want to remind you, if you want to check out more about Rogue Tulips, go to our website, roguetulips.com. You can learn about our education program. We're already planning for fall. If you need some ethics education, we do that all year long. Look at our services page, see how we can work together. Would love to have a conversation with you. And if you want to know what's on my mind this week, because you never know what the heck I'm thinking about, check out the blog page. You can find this podcast with Bruce and share it with your friends on our podcast page. And also check out our other podcast episodes. We've had a lot of great conversations the last few years, like I've mentioned. So there's something for everybody. So on behalf of Bruce and myself, we'll see you next time. That's it for this week. I hope you really loved this episode as much as I did. Thanks for listening. Learn more about how our experience and knowledge at Rogue Tulips can give your organization the strategic edge to reach its goals. Check out our website at roguetulips.com. We'd love to talk with you and see how we can work together. Thanks.